Hey, 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 what is up, everyone? Welcome to another Friday night live stream. I'm your host, Brandon Hicks with the Orange Guild, and tonight we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be doing some celebrity sculpting likeness in Blender 2.8. So, before we get started, we got to pick a celebrity, and I'm going to talk a little bit about 2.8 and where we're at. The Blender conference has just ended a couple of weekends ago, or maybe last weekend. Let's talk about 2.8. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and transition my screen over so you guys can see what I'm looking at. And this is the Blender website. Now, typically when you go to blender.org, this is what you're gonna see. So the first thing I want to let you guys know is that 2.8 beta is right around the corner, and if you want to start playing with the version I'm going to be using tonight, then here's how you need to go about getting it. So if you go to the download section, then you're going to see the typical download Blender button. It's going to try to auto pick your operating system and all of that stuff. But you're going to want to go down a little bit to the experimental section here with a little rocket ship. You're going to click latest experimental builds, and I just downloaded the Blender 2.8 version here. We're still technically in Alpha 2, and I downloaded it for 64-bit Windows because that's what I'm using. Download the zip file. It's going to give you a zip file, which I'll open up right here for you guys. Just like this, drag this folder to your desktop. Inside of this, you're going to have the entire Blender directory, including the blender.exe file, which you can run right there. So I've just dragged this to my desktop. That's what I'm using. And that's how I got the version I'm using tonight, if you're curious. So let's go to Google. Wow, I can't even type tonight. We're going to look up celebrities. And I need you guys to help me pick a celebrity that we're going to sculpt tonight, because I talked a little bit with my wife about what to sculpt, and um, yeah, we had some fun talking about that, but couldn't really land on anything specific. I've got some ideas of my own, but I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to jump in the conversation here and let me know what you think about options. So, do you want me to do a man, a woman? Let's hear it in the stream chat. If you're a YouTube and you have a little box to the right, let me know in the chat what you want me to sculpt. We talked about doing Morgan Freeman as an option. Hey, Lorenzo, what's up? Welcome to the chat. We're doing some celebrity sculpting tonight, but I'm trying to pick a celebrity. So, can you help me? Who do you want me to sculpt? Angelina Jolie, says Lorian. All right, so that's an option. Get Angelina Jolie. My wife actually said that too, so that's a possibility. Are you guys in favor of woman over a man, man over a woman? Just let me know. We gotta find a picture to use, and we can go from there. So typically when I'm looking for something like this, you can kind of use any image you want, but the better sort of straight-on profile image you can find, the better off you're going to be. So Max Chandler says a woman. All right, so let's maybe look at Angelina Jolie. Angelina Jolie profile. Okay, so if I was gonna do like a 3D model and not a sculpt, basically you'd want to find a couple of images that are the same, and then you do a front and a side and maybe a top. And with those three images, you could load those straight into Blender's viewport and kind of use those. So what I really would like to have is something kind of neutral, like this to start from. And Lorenzo is saying Emma Watson. Okay, so we can discuss what you guys want, but let's just kind of get going here. Not sure if I can get an entire one of these done in 2 hours, but we're gonna try. So yeah, you want an image that's kind of neutral. You don't want a lot of facial expressions like smiling and things that are kind of going extreme, because that is going to be one of those things that is not superposable. It's better to start off with a neutral pose if you plan on rigging this up later or something like that, converting this into an animated character, and then kind of add the smiles later. Now, you can start off sculpting expression in if you're just going to kind of go for a sculpt and then be done, and then kind of move on to a new project. But just wanted to give you guys some tips there on how I would approach this. So, this might be an okay one. Actually, we're going to want to search for a large image and try to get one that is decent. So I'm going to pull that up. See if we can find any others that will work. And something like this might be okay. Ideally, again, if you can find any where they've modeled from a front and a side view, like a really good one would be like this one for a side view, that you can use and line them up in 3D, then that would work really, really well. So, um, yeah, let's just see what that first one looks like and maybe go with that one. So before we jump in tonight, I want to ask you how you guys are doing. Let me know in the chat. I would love to hear how your week's been. What are you interested in talking about tonight um, with the 3D sculpting in terms of celebrity? Because I would love to kind of help you guys work through any issues you're having or anything like that. And this is 2.8. We'll talk about that in a second. But I'm going to go ahead and grab this image in a new window here. And while I'm doing that, you guys let me know in the chat. What are you thinking about tonight? Go ahead and save this image to the folder for tonight. So let me go ahead and grab that. Okay, so Angelina. So we can go ahead and pull this up. And I've been using this new program called PureRef that I saw some of my buddies using, and it is pretty cool. So I'm going to try to use that tonight just to show you guys how it works. So I'm going to load an image. Let's pull in our image that we just downloaded. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm sorry about going through all these menus. Okay, so this is pretty cool because you can pull this up and right click will kind of move this around. You can make this any size you want. It'll optionally kind of stay on top of your screen while you're working on stuff. And so that's kind of a cool way to have this going. So I'm not going to leave this up here on this screen, but just so you guys know, this is what I'm using on the other screen, zooming in and out with the scroll wheel, stuff like that, to kind of keep this where I can see it. So I'm going to pull this over to the other screen here, and what I might do for you guys is pull in an image editor, and I'm going to go ahead and start a new scene here. So we're all on the same page, and let's pull open that image in the UV image editor over here. I'm going to open that up. Okay, let's go to there, pull that up, and now we can see this in Blender. So what I'm going to try to do is set the screen up in 2.8 so you guys can see all of my settings. And go ahead and create a new drop down here. There we go. So now we've got a little space for my webcam that you guys can still see all the menus. There. Okay. So this is 2.8. There's quite a bit that's changed, especially over the past few weeks. So let's kind of jump in and talk about some things I would do if you're going to jump in and set up this new version of 2.8. You'll primarily notice the interface is changing quite a bit. The icons have been moved from the top here to the side. And there's some other toolbar icons that have been changing over here as well. Now, if you expand this out, you're going to see those expand into some lists. So if you need to see the names of the tools and things like that, that's going to help. Right now, we want to go to user preferences under edit, check on our system settings, make sure all of our graphics cards and things like that are enabled for tonight's stuff in the viewport. and everything else that we would need is going to be kind of default. So we're going to leave that there, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these things in the viewport, and we can kind of talk about how to go about sculpting in 2.8 as it's a little bit different than 2.79. So let me go ahead and move this out of the way so I can see the chat here. Max says, can we leave the links to the reference photos when we're done in the chat? Yeah. So I will go ahead and I'll add a comment and pin it at the top of this this video when it gets uploaded. So it may take a couple of hours max for that to happen, but you should have the link to whatever I'm using for that in the comment when it's uploaded. Okay, so here is how we go about getting started. Now, as you know, when I'm kind of working in Blender, I like to have a minimal sort of environment in the viewport. And so what's great about 2.8, if you don't already know this, is under the overlays menu here in the 3D viewport, you've got all these options for what you can turn on and off. So I typically don't like to have my grid and the axes showing. So it's really easy to turn that off now. You can just uncheck grid, uncheck these axes, and those just all go away. So the other thing you can do is turn everything on and off with one click, which is just this little button next to the overlays palette. So if I turn all of that off, all my gizmos, all this stuff over here, all the labels, the 3D cursor, all that stuff is just going to be gone. So as we're sculpting, that can be helpful, but you got to remember that's how you turn this on and off in case you accidentally turn something off and you don't want to. Okay, so let's take a look at how the menus have shifted around, because typically all of that stuff that we would typically alter is on the left-hand side in the tools palette, but now it's kind of in this new workspace settings button here. So at the very top of this menu, you're going to see a new menu called workspace settings, and whatever you have selected or whatever object or whatever mode you're in, it's going to change what you're kind of seeing here. So what we need to do is, as we shift through the things that we're using over here for the tools, you're going to notice things are changing, and we just have to be aware that that is why that's happening. So the first thing we're going to do is select this cube, and we're going to talk about how we would go ahead and approach modeling this head. So I like to start with something simple. You can start with a cube. Typically, I might start with something a little bit more round. So I've just added a subsurf modifier to this. If we go to the modifier tab, which I'm still getting used to all of the new icons here, but they're sort of similar to the past icons. So you just hover over each of these and it'll sort of show you a little tooltip. This is the modifier palette. So we're going to apply the subsurf at a level of 1, and that's just going to give us a little bit of geometry to work with. You can see we just subdivided that a little bit. So it's more of a sphere, which is going to be helpful, so we don't have to round this out by hand. Okay, so let's jump into sculpt mode, and let's look at our options. So I'm going to jump into that top palette we just talked about, the active tool and workspace settings palette, and you can see our settings here. So it's the same stuff we're used to. We've got our sculpt draw brush there. It's not going to show you all the other ones because those are still over here on the left in the tools palette, and that'll just update your options over here. So they're kind of split across the screen. If you wanted to rearrange this, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but as I said, this is a fresh install, and I haven't changed any of the settings because I wanted you guys to see how this works. So we've got some new brushes, it looks like, which I'm not exactly sure what those do yet. I'll have to get into those. But all of our normal ones are also here. And so we'll start with clay strips here and just kind of get going on getting the head modeled up. Now, all of the options are also kind of up here per brush. So if you don't want to have to dig through a vertical menu over here, you can also get some of those options at the top of the screen there. Okay, I think that's all we need to talk about as far as tool options go for the sculpting. One more thing I want to talk about is matte caps. Those are a little different in 2.8. So if you want to kind of get in here and play with those, you're going to want to jump into the shading palette. And right now I'm under the solid viewport shading, which is the second button over. You've got wireframe, you've got solid view, you've got new look dev, and then you've got the rendered here. So we're going to go under shading, and then we're going to click, instead of flat studio, we're going to click on matte cap. And it comes bundled with a bunch of new matte cap versions. So you can see we've got our trusty old ZBrush style red clay there. We've got some gray materials and all that sort of stuff. So just pick one that you want to use, and that's how you get started. And of course, we're going to turn on some of our options here for these things. Now, I'm going to turn on dynamic topology. It's going to warn me that there's vertex data detected. I'm not sure out of the box why that's the case, but because I didn't add any UVs or anything weird that would be giving me that warning, but that shows up there. So just ignore that, and let's keep going. Okay, so I'm going to set my detail size maybe at about 8. And let's just start with clay strips. I've still got symmetry on, I believe. Yeah, symmetry lock is on the x-axis. I'm going to rotate over a little bit so I'm facing sort of a 3/4 view here. I'm using a pin tablet, and I'm also using my mouse. So my right click, or my middle click on my mouse button, I'm using to rotate around, and then I'm using my pin to sculpt with simultaneously, if you guys are curious. So, as you can see here, we are able to use clay strips and really quickly start to kind of get this working. Now, we've got to make sure we're under the right axis here because it doesn't look like symmetry is working there. Okay, so I'm just not rotated around the right direction. This is my negative x, this is my positive x. Now we're good. Okay. So let's zoom in here. Keyboard shortcuts still work for size of your radius and your strength. So F is going to increase the size here of this, and then Shift F will increase your strength as needed. Now, what I did notice is that the plus and the minus options here for the brush, whether you're adding or taking away clay, are kind of, it feels like they're inverted right now. So if I go negative, it actually adds. Which is what I want. So I'm not really sure why that's happening. Not sure if that's a glitch or if it's just a new setting here, but I found that kind of odd. So what I'm doing now is I'm staying zoomed out so that it's not going to add tons of detail because we're still looking at the relative detail setting. So if I zoom in close, it's going to get more detailed on the surface. If I stay zoomed out, it's going to still give me just a few polygons to work with. So let's start trying to get the overall head shape in place. Let's hold shift and smooth this out a little bit. And we're gonna, when we're working on stuff like this for head sculpting or any kind of sculpt really, we're gonna go from general to specific. So you are gonna be tempted to jump in and kind of start working on all of these features that you see popping out because it's kind of what we're trained to do. Our eyes, as humans, we're trained to look at the details and see, what we're working with. But you see how small this image is in the upper right-hand corner. I want to stay that far zoomed out also while I'm sculpting right now and just block in the overall outline of the head. And that way we are starting off on a really good foundation. Getting this into place. Now, the tough part about this, and this is the reason I talked about this earlier, is that we don't have alternative profile views, so we don't have a side view, we only have a front view. And so I'm gonna have to guess how big her head is from front to back and things like that. Now, if it were, gonna be something that I do where I do an entire model and I really wanna focus on the details and get them perfect, I would really need to find another image to go off of, at least a side profile. But if you're just doing this as a quick exercise, this is a really good way to try to get in here and block in some detail and just use your perception to see what's working and what's not. So I'm going to use the grab tool here, and I'm just going to kind of pull out a little neck at the bottom. And we might go ahead, and since we're using dynamic topology, even if we move things around quite a bit, it's not really going to matter because it's going to continuously subdivide for us. So you can feel free to kind of play around with what's working. And I'm just looking at the overall shape of the head right now and trying to make sure that we get things going in a direction that works. Now, one of the other things we can talk about is your camera view and the 3D viewport. By default, if you look in the tools palette, or not the tools palette, the properties palette in the right-hand side by hitting N on the keyboard, it's going to show your focal length of your camera under view. So that will show you either a wide angle lens like this or a telephoto lens if you get into the 100, 200 millimeter range that you would see here. Now, typically you're going to want to keep this at a range that is a little bit more like 50, somewhere around there for the human eye, because that's kind of what you're going to be seeing in real life if you're looking at something as you're sculpting. And so if you get too wide, down to 18, something like that, and you're zooming in, you can see how much it distorts on the edges with this angle, because it's like a wide angle lens in a camera. And if you get too telephoto, like 200 millimeters, it's going to flatten everything out, which may seem like it's easier to sculpt with, but it's going to distort your actual perception of what you're sculpting. So you want to get this as close to 50 as you can, and probably keep it around there. And the other thing is you want to make sure you're not in orthographic view. So if you hit 5 on your numpad and it flattens out the perspective because you've got orthographic turned on, you can see that in the upper left-hand corner. That's not good. You want to be sculpting in perspective mode. So hit 5 again on your numpad, and that's going to put you back in perspective mode, which again is going to alter your perspective of how the shapes are coming together in the 3D viewport. So just some tips as we get in here that I've kind of learned over the years that will help you dial this in. Okay, so we've got our strength all the way up. I'm going to lower the size just a tiny bit there. And I'm not trying to get like features like her nose and her eyes and all that stuff dialed in right now. I'm really just looking at this outer profile of her head, her jawline, things like that, and trying to decide, are we getting close to what those need to look like, or are we still going to need to kind of work on that stuff? So you can see it comes down to sort of a rounded point here, back up, rounded point on the sides of her jaw, and then it kind of balloons out towards the top where her head would be. Now try to take the hair out of the equation and just think about her head underneath, and focus on her cheekbones. You can see those here come up and out a little bit as we get to the ear line, and they kind of line up with her ears there. So I'm holding shift now to smooth some of this out. And we just want to get that big oval shape in there. Let's pull the neck down a little bit more. And I need to add some more geometry in here for the neck. So I'm going to switch back to clay strips. And we can do that here. So it's a pretty iterative process. What we're going to want is to be able to start big, work to a smaller and smaller increment of detail. And it's really up to you how you go about doing this, but that's the basic principle for making sure things don't fall apart as you're trying to get things in place, because the more you jump into detail fast, the harder it's going to be to maintain some consistency over what's going on. And so if you can refrain from some of that, then you're going to be in a much better place here. Okay. Switch to a side view, and you can see we've got the head tilted kind of a little bit like this. So what I want to do is actually just rotate this to kind of get this into a better position here, and I'll just go ahead and apply the rotation so it zeroes that back out, and this is my sort of default now. So let's get back into sculpt mode and double check our settings one more time. Turned off dynamic topology again on us, so make sure we turn that back on. And now we should be good to go. So let's get our grab again. I'm going to pull the neck in back here. And again, from the side, I'm still just kind of guesstimating at what is really going on, because, like I said, I can't really see that stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and start blocking in our big geometric features that we see on the face. Now, the forehead is pretty, it's pretty flat. It's rounded, obviously, but the draft angle here on the forehead is not too extreme from what I can tell, and it's got a pretty broad forehead here with not a lot of features. And on a woman especially, you're not going to want to add tons and tons of detail into the face, especially early on, because more lines equal less appealing. So just keep that in mind. Keep it loose and simple as you start blocking all this stuff in, and don't try to get crazy with the wrinkles and stuff early because it's going to make her look kind of ugly. So real simple, we're going to add some holes for the eyes, and we're just going to start measuring proportions here to try to get this blocked out. So we know about a third or a half of the way down from the head. And remember, the hairline is covering up some skin under here, so we're going to want to factor that into the equation. So about halfway down the head, we're going to have her brow line, and then inside of that, we're going to have the eyes right there. So typical measurements here, just to bear in mind, you're going to want to go from reference, but the width between each eye is going to be about the width of one eye in between here. And then you're obviously going to want to make sure you're paying attention to the depth as you rotate around. So let's get into that a little bit as we start sculpting. So I'm about halfway down. The brows are going to be somewhere around here. The cavities for the eyes, I'm holding control now and sculpting those in, are going to be somewhere in there. And then you're going to have the nose, and then the lips, and then the chin. So if you start to notice that your measurements are off, this is the time to fix them, because you're not going to be able to adjust a lot of that stuff as you get further and further into this process. So if I'm noticing that I need more room on the chin at this point, now is the time to really kind of bring that down and then add that detail back in. So I might switch down to like a level of 6 so we can add some more of that detail in at this point. And if you're not wanting to zoom in and out a lot to define that detail, you can switch from relative detail to something like manual detail, brush detail, or constant detail. And if you're not sure about the resolution, you can use this little eyedropper to pick a resolution that's already on the model, and that will let you maintain sort of a consistent resolution there. So now if we're at 20 and we would say we want to go down to like 15, that's going to let us dial that in a little bit better there. So just kind of brushing really lightly over an area with a smaller resolution setting is going to add geometry, and that's an easy way to kind of start refining that process. Now, a lot of trouble with sculpting with one image like this is that you tend to sculpt from the front because that's what you're looking at, and you forget to rotate around a lot and look at perspective. So you got to remember, her nose is coming off of her face. Her lips are kind of doing the same, and her eyes are inset. And you can see from the shadowing here how that is working. So these are sort of like balls, and they're inset into the face with a cavity. And so if we grab this tool and we pull those back, that's a little bit more accurate in terms of what we're going to be seeing here on the face. And the nose is probably going to come off a little bit more like that. Now her cheekbones are going to be a little bit further out, and then her face is going to kind of pull in a little bit from the front. It's going to do a little bit of something like that. And this is where we can talk about getting into shaping big features like the outside of the nose and the mouth. If you look at the center of the pupils and you go straight down, that's kind of where the corners of her mouth are going to be. So that's where you want to start lining those features up. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and drop in some simple eyeballs here. So let's go ahead and add in a mesh. Let's do a UV sphere. And let's rotate this 90 degrees. Jump into edit mode. And I'm going to isolate. Okay, I can't isolate with the keyboard shortcut, so let's move this. We're using collections. So, okay, let me just do it from the 3D viewport. Okay, so what I want to do is delete half of this here, and we're just going to leave the other half there. Now, the pivot's still in the middle of the sphere, so when I scale, it's still going to scale from the middle. And then I want to create a little bit of an imprint or an edge here for the way the pupil looks. So I'm going to want to select all of this stuff here, and I'm going to extrude that out just a little bit. And let's add in an edge loop there. Switch back into solid. Let's smooth that out. Okay, so you can see how that kind of starts to look like the lens of an eye, and that's really all we need. to make this work. Okay, so now let's scale this down. And we're going to want to position these in the head here. So let's go ahead and jump into the modifiers. Let's add a mirror modifier. And we start pulling this off the axis here. Okay, so the modifier is going to work best if we use the center of another object. So we're going to use the head here. So let's grab the head as our mirror object. And now we should be able to switch into the front view and kind of line these up. So imagine these as big golf balls in the head. And remember what I said, you want the width between these to be about the width of one of these eyeballs. And looking in the chat, Lauren's asking, why did you remove the back half of the eyeball? You don't have to. I just did it out of habit for old school modeling. A lot of times it will save you a little bit of geometry, and that's what I used to do a lot. So that's why I did it, because it's just habit. Okay, so you gotta just kind of pick how far back you think these should go. Remember that you've got lids that go on top, you've got eyelashes that come out, and so just ballpark this for now. But realize that you're gonna kind of sculpt around these. So once you get them in place, they need to kind of stay in place. And you don't need to be moving these around a ton. So look at the distance between, again, remember line up the edge of the mouth, and that's where the mouth is gonna go. So if it looks a little weird, now in terms of the alignment of where the edge of the mouth is going to go, then you want to fix that. So I think we're probably okay right about there. And now we can go ahead and say, all right, well, I've got a reference point. So let's go ahead and sculpt around that for these objects. Let's switch back into sculpt mode. Jump back into our settings. Once again, I'm not sure why that's continually turning dynamic topology on and off for us. But there we go. Okay, so now that we have the eyeball in place, it's easy enough to grab our tool and just kind of dig in or pull out. So holding the control key here, let's switch down to 10 real quick. And we can pull. So I don't know. Oh, okay, so it looks like the resolution on constant detail, if you turn this up, it works opposite. So if you want more resolution, make that a higher number rather than a lower number. So I'm trying to get the outer edges of the eyes sort of surrounded by some skin here. So we're just kind of digging this in a little bit. And again, we're not going to want to get too detailed. We're just going to want to make sure we have enough skin to work with. But now those eyes are kind of enclosed. And we can get in here now and sort of start working on other stuff. So I'm going to stop working on the eyes, as tempting as it is to kind of keep getting in here and working that stuff out right now. I would recommend not doing that too early. Okay, so one big change I might make at this point is correcting the skin so that it's a little bit further in and not covering up the eye there. So you can see I just pulled a huge section of that skin in and off that eyeball. And then we could also pull some of this back inside. So pull that back in and uncover some of that eye. Just like that. So you can see how far that goes back in to try to expose the inner area of the eye here. And it's stretching those polygons with the grab tool, but we're going to fix that by utilizing our dynamic topology to correct that. So if I switch back into clay, I can then turn the the sort of strength down quite a bit, which is not going to pull that off of the surface. And then by using the detail here, we can go ahead and add more polygons and fill in those detail areas back the way they should be. So now when I smooth that, you can see all the other extra polygons that have been added in now. Lauren's asking in 2.8, where do you look for the number of vertices and faces? Okay, so let me look real fast. If we are in object mode, jumping into edit mode. Let's look under our properties here. So I'm not seeing it there. Could be under overlays. My guess is that they would have put it under the overlays because that makes the most sense to me. But I'm not sure. So, not seeing it there. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that because typically it would be like in a menu up here, and that's definitely not showing right now. Oh, there it is. Bottom right hand corner. There's where all of your vertices and faces and triangles and all that stuff are. So that makes sense to me because that's the status bar, and that's where a lot of stuff would be if you're in another program. So that makes sense. So let's see if I can go full screen. So not F11. What is the full screen? So I guess they don't have a shortcut for that yet, and that's not working because you guys can't. Oh, maybe you can? Yeah, you guys can see that. Okay, yeah, for a second there, it blacked out. Yeah, so full screen is maybe a little better for you guys to be able to see stuff. But that's kind of what we're working with. So let's jump back into sculpt mode. And let's switch to brush detail. Let's play with this a little bit. Okay, so let's look at the nose now. Try to get that blocked in a little bit better. So you can see she's got kind of a defined ridge right here running down, and that blends into the nose a little bit softer down there. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see these features a little bit better. And I'm looking at planes, so basic planes of the nose. I'm not trying to get perfect curves or all that stuff. I'm thinking if I were to simplify this into lines, into blocky shapes, what would this look like? So we've got some simple curvature and flat edges sort of running down there. So if I were to hold control and kind of pull that in, kind of do that, I'm going to make a smaller brush there. And a better way to think about this might be to grab something like the scrape tool and try to think about this the way that we would work on like a hard surface shape. So this would essentially kind of create planes on the face for us. And as I start to sculpt using this, you'll see kind of how this works. So I'm going to want to flatten out, areas like in here, underside, and I've got the detail turned down or up, however you want to look at it, to kind of make this a little easier to see. But again, the lower resolution you can keep, the longer, the better it's going to be. So, what's up, D. America? How you doing, bro? Good to see you in the chat. So we gotta get some more definition in here, some more depth. So I'm gonna carve in using control. And then we can switch back to scrape. So I don't have any keyboard shortcuts set up. It would really speed things up if I did have that set up tonight. But I don't have that dialed in yet in 2.8. And they don't have any defaults really set up perfectly yet. So there might be one if you hover. Yeah, they've got some set up. So 7 is scrape, 2 is clay strips. So that might be similar to the way it was in the past, but as I'm looking at this, oh, okay, they've got a little toolbar set up there. So in the 3D viewport, if you get space, you can pick instead of having to go over there, which is probably what I'll start doing, because it'll keep the interface a little bit more clean. So okay, so I'm gonna turn the scrape amount up quite a bit, and let's just try to dial in what we got here. So don't be afraid to like really get in there and just dig at, you know, what you got going on. And then go back. And what I wouldn't get into the habit of doing right off is like smoothing every time you make a big change, because it really just kind of wastes time early on. So focus on those big shapes, get those in, and you know, don't worry about the other stuff yet. So that will speed you up quite a bit as you're going in here. Okay, I want to get those little nose holes sort of in place. So I'm going to pull that in. And switch back to scrape. And once again. So now we got a nose. And it's not perfect, but it's a nose. Now we can move on to the lips and get those in. So we're at about 45 minutes in at this point. And had I not been talking so much, we'd probably be a lot further. But oh well. Hope you guys are having a good time. I'm doing well, Emerga. What's up? You guys liking the streams? You guys liking tonight's stream? Is it working for you? So this is Angelina Jolie, and that's who we're working on tonight. And once again, we're getting to a point now where we're trying to focus on details, and you want to just nix that urge, because big features, big positions, those are the most important things. So even at this point, I'm looking at, okay, got a little inset under the nose. All right, we got that in place. That needs to be pretty shallow. And then we get the lips coming off that. Those are going to be a big shape coming off of the face. And then we're going to dig in under those. And of course that transition is going to be very subtle. So I'm holding shift and smoothing now. And then we're going to want more and more detail, so we can kind of start getting those planes in place. So think about this like we're just kind of building up cross-hatching on the face and kind of working that out. So right now you can see a very distinct separation on the cheekbones. And with makeup and lighting and everything else, we're really not seeing that. So you got to kind of look through all of that and imagine what's really there. And you can see with the detail turned up now, we're getting lines and all that extra stuff. We don't really want that on those big planes of the face. So turn your percentage back up under brush detail and use less geometry. And that way when you smooth, it's going to smooth back out a lot better for you. Soft face. Oh, I see. You're in Europe, man. Yeah. So what time is it there? That's got to be a huge time difference. Is it it's like 8 hours or so, or what is that like? So we got the lips, we got like a plane of the face coming off. And you can see that this is sort of a big orange peel type of shape right around here, coming up off of the face. So it's extruding out, and that's what we need to block in first. So don't worry about the lips right now. And don't worry about, missing a little bit of detail that we already sculpted. I want to get this separation here on the face. And then smooth that back out. If you're getting a little too detailed, zoom out, or again, turn up your detail percentage. Oh man, 2:47 a.m. That's crazy. I'm sorry that we're not able to stream at a better time for you. I'm actually considering moving the live stream, guys. What do you think about me moving to another night? Is there a night that's better for you guys? Because I want this to be available for everyone. So if you're in the chat right now and you think there's a better night for me to stream, let me know, because I am open to suggestions right now. Okay, so you can see now at a 3/4 view, we're like, all right, I see the separation more. Now I can see it. We're coming off of the face. All right, I got you. There we go. Okay, yeah, no problem, Lauren. Let's hit T and let's pull those brushes back up on the screen on the left so you can see what I'm using. I don't have the ability to turn on keystrokes in 2.8 because the add-on doesn't work, so I'm sorry I can't do that for you tonight. There's not currently an option to do that, but we will work on that. Okay, so let's grab this, and again, we're gonna plane this out, okay? So let's zoom in a little bit more again. Okay, so the Emerga says, do not change. I'm already part of your Saturday morning YouTube routine. Okay. Lorenzo says sometime during the week, Monday through Thursday for the stream anytime. So you guys, I know you guys all probably work. So like, do you like evening streams? Do you like morning streams? What do you guys like to see? I'm not usually up real early in the morning. I'm kind of a night owl, but you guys can let me know and we can work on something. Okay, Lauren says Friday nights work well for me. All right, so maybe I'll just send out like a survey. If you're on the email list, maybe you can get a survey from me and we can just vote on it. But I want to make sure that we can get as many people into the streams as possible so that everybody has a chance to kind of talk and just express what's going on. I wanted to mention to you guys, I did do an update to the website. So if you guys have been trying to log in or not, real quick, I just want to kind of pop in and share with you guys what's going on. So I promise we'll get back to the sculpting in just a second. But give me one chance to kind of give you guys a little bit of an update because this is kind of important. So let me. Okay, so now if you go to the orangeguild.com or even www.theorangeguild.com. Either way, you're going to land on this new website that I'm working on. So basically what I'm trying to do is create a blog and adds features to the guild so you guys have options. So you're going to see this new little blurb here that mentions we have a new website. Basically, you can use this link or this link or this link or this link to get back to the original. When you click that, it's going to take you to a new subdomain called entertheorangeguild.com, and that's how you start accessing all of your training. So by default, it's going to take you to the sort of landing page for this, but if you just go to training, you can log in, get all your stuff here, and check that out. So there is some new stuff I'm working on. I've got a huge boot camp coming out this month for you guys, and that is going to have some more information coming your way. I'm hoping to release that on Cyber Monday. But I've got this new course that I threw up that is awesome. So basically, it's called the Inner Circle. It's free for everybody to join that's part of the guild. And basically, it's just going to update you on stuff that's going on. So each week, I'm going to try to throw a video in here that's really just kind of a face-to-face update, webcam, kind of like what we're doing tonight. And it's just going to show you what we're doing behind the scenes. So if you have questions about courses, where are they at, what are the new things coming up, why does the website look different, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to start throwing videos up in here for you guys to be in the loop, so I don't have to send an email out every single time I want to talk to you guys about some cool stuff that's happening. So that's kind of what's going on with the website. Remember, when you get to theorangeguild.com, you're going to see some different things. I'm going to start adding in like a blog, tutorials, free stuff for people that aren't yet members. But if you're currently a member, you can get back to the interface that we're still using for all the courses if you just use one of the links on the front page to go to the new subdomain. So hope that's a little easier for you guys to understand for you that are here. I'm going to be doing a bigger email when I get everything set up and fixed later this month, but for now, that's kind of what we're doing. All right, so I'm going to get a quick drink here, and let's get back to the sculpting. So we're in that ugly phase right now. You can see she looks terrible, and a lot of you guys will probably get to this point and just give up. And I would encourage you guys not to do that, because even when pros get to this point, we get a little intimidated because it's like, oh man, she looks so bad. But I promise, it won't stay that way. And the trick to really getting things locked down is pick out the main features that make her who she is, like her lips, the overall shape of her nose, the shape of her eyes, things like that. Lock those down early, along with the bigger outer shape of her head. And if you can nail key points like that in terms of proportion and all of that stuff early on, she'll start to look like herself a lot sooner. So don't worry about how ugly it looks, because it will get better. All right, so one of the things we can start doing here is let's crease. We're going to want to draw in that lip line, so I'm going to pull this in, turn that up quite a bit. I don't want crease. Or, yeah, I do, but I want it to go the other way. All right, we get a lip. That's not what I want. So the curve here is kind of important. We want something that's going to be a little bit more intense. So we don't want wide. We want to go the other way. But what I might do is kind of manually pull this in a little bit more. So I want it to be really steep. And we're going to zoom in here. Let's pay attention to the cut of her lips. So let's not just draw a line like this. Let's pay attention. So we've got some subtle details going on from the center here. And you see the asymmetry going on? That's hugely important. Now, we're not going to do an asymmetrical fix tonight, but a lot of what is going to make her feel less uncanny valley and more realistic is going to be the ability to go asymmetrical and fix a lot of that stuff. And so if you get the spacing wrong, undo a couple of times, go back, and map it out. So here's what we do. We go, all right, so this comes down, and it's about lined up with her nostrils. So if her nostrils are here, that's going to be one split of the lip. There's going to be a split of the lip about a third of the way down over here, and then that's going to come out and go a little further out to the corner. So I'm going to go a little further in, come out to here, and then let's draw in. I'm going to have a line there, a little bit of a line there, something like that, okay? This is where we start to define where that separation is there for the upper part of the lip. And I'm just using the crease tool here to give me some, I'm like drawing on the face. I'm just giving myself some guides to go off of that tell me, all right, am I close? Am I not close? Now, I don't have enough geometry here. I can already tell this is caving in way too quick. We've got a lot more bulge happening here. So what I want to do is add some more definition here to this lip. And I just want to give that center bulge coming out here, because you see it starts sort of inside, and then this is the height of its bulging out. You can tell by the highlight on her face. And then it flattens back out and goes in just a tiny bit here, and then you have sort of a flatter part, and her chin goes out a little bit further from that. So we don't really want this giant cave-in on the bottom of her face. So we're going to fix that now. We're going to get rid of some of the detail in the brush. Not that much. and then we're going to add in some geometry again. So ignore the color of her lips right now. Pay attention to the shadowing. There's a tiny little bit of concave collapse after her lip, but not much. Overall, it's pretty flat right there. And so now we can see, all right, well, if her lips kind of are looking like that, then is her chin in the right place? Is all of that, where it needs to be? All that kind of stuff. And if it's not, now is the time to fix it. So let's zoom out a little bit, and we go, all right. So let's take our crease tool. Let's draw some more. Let's lower that down, take our size down again. And we're all right. So from the front here, let's draw where this chin is on our sculpture. So now that's a very faint line because of the lighting and her makeup and all that stuff, but there's a line there that forms the top of her chin. So we need to look in our model and go, all right, well, where does that need to be? So starts right about there. It's pretty faint. And then her chin rounds off sort of like this. And then there's sort of an edge here. So let's clean this up. Let's get back into clay strips. Let's pull this up to 30 or so. I'm going to smooth all this out. Okay, so I'm looking at this and seeing some problems. Okay, so because we're getting some weird things happening with the mesh right here, what I'm going to do is go ahead and do a remesh. So if you look under the dynamic topology, you got this remesh option. And what I want to do is go ahead and symmetrize from the negative x to the positive x again. So theoretically, that shouldn't do much because we've got symmetry turned on. But let's go ahead and do that. And what it should do is clean up all those little weird things that were happening in here. Stray polygons, all that kind of stuff. Now, let's pull back. Let's take a look at her face for her chin. So dug in a little bit. We're going to want to pull that out to correct whatever we did there. Emerg is asking what kind of graphics tablet am I using. So I was using a Wacom, which I'm a huge fan of, but I actually downgraded from my Cintiq to using a Huion tablet that was only like 75 or $100 online, and I got that from Amazon. So I'll probably do a review on that at some point because I love this tablet. But it's basically like it's like a 12-inch tablet. It doesn't have a screen. It's pretty cheap, but it's got like 2,000 or 4,000 levels of pressure. I don't remember, but I like it a lot, and I'm using that now for pretty much everything. So I've gone with the best, and then I've decided that the thing about the Cintiq is that it's just bulky, it's heavy, it gets in the way, it's really expensive. And these, if I spill something on it, I break it, whatever, I can just buy a new one because they're cheaper by, they're about a 20th of the cost, so it's pretty cheap comparatively. But yeah, I can get you the model and stuff, and like I said, I'll do a review on the channel at some point soon, so you guys can see what I'm using, and I'm gonna start doing some things with product reviews on the YouTube channel, so you guys get a feel for all the gear if you're curious about what I'm using. I like talking gear. It's not as important as obviously knowing just how to do art, but I can understand wanting to know what people are using. So I get it. Okay. Yeah, that sounds right. Huion H610 Pro. Yeah, that sounds about right. I think I'm using the version 2, if that matters. This one is still wired, so I'm still going in through a USB cable. It's not wireless or anything like that. I've noticed with the Wi-Fi wireless stuff, you get into battery issues and having to recharge, and I hate that. I'd rather just have something reliable that I can use all the time and you just go with it. Okay, so at this point, I'm looking at all the features. The only thing we haven't really fixed in terms of big features is her eyes. So I'm gonna go back up and work on that now. We got about an hour left, and so I'll probably just continue this sculpture next week and keep working on this. But you can see, like, as we start to zoom out, we've got wrinkles and stuff like that, and that's again from getting too much resolution here too early. And so you want to fix all that by lowering the resolution, and then you want to, or actually in this case, turning up the detail percentage, flattening back out all that stuff so that you've got less polygons to work with, and then just going from there. Now I don't want to lose everything I worked on, so I'm gonna turn this up a little higher, but you can see there that it pays to just not go crazy here because you don't need all that detail right now. So just a few less polygons is, it's good for everybody. All right, so let's work on the eyes. Let's try to nail that, and then we'll make sure there's no other huge problems with the big proportions of her face before we try to kind of get the rest of the stuff in place tonight. And what I'll probably do is to wrap up tonight as we get towards the end of the stream is just get her neck in place, her shoulders, maybe her ears, and stuff like that. I may not do ears because ears are tricky, and we need to probably talk some more about that, but let's look at her eyes. Okay. So the eyes are really important to get these locked in and down and make sure that we kind of know what we're doing here. So let's get in here with a little bit smaller of a brush. Let's lower our detail setting. And I don't mind going a little lower here because, we want to start getting into the lids and all that kind of stuff. So let's start with the scrape tool. And I just want to get some planes going on here because there's a lot of complex interaction happening with these eyes. So starting with the brows, we're going to want to round off sort of these areas by moving around with the scrape brush and kind of dig in on this edge here. And then if you notice that you're missing some areas there's, clay in our case, but there's skin that's not filled in here, grab your clay brush and then just add that back in. And the clay brush is great for just filling in areas where you don't have enough to work with. So you can see there's some additive shading here, implying that there's some like a lump instead of skin. And then we've got a crease separating the underside of her upper eyelid from the brow bone, and so we'll add that back in. But let's start by getting enough clay to kind of work with here. So I'm using the clay tool to fill this in, holding shift to smooth, just so we have enough to work with, and then we can go from there. So I'm adding back clay. Let's use clay strips. And it helps to look from left to right to see kind of on both sides the way it's looking with the lighting. And now we can use the crease tool to kind of get in here and start adding those in. So just quickly trying to brush those in, doesn't have to be perfect. Starting about right here, we've got a crease. It's coming up and kind of around like this. And we've got, looking at her eyes now, we know, all right, well, maybe her eyes are a little big. So let's try to correct that right now. And we're still going from the center, right? So we can pull these forward a little bit to line those up, but I want to make sure the edge of these, in terms of the size of the pupil and all that stuff, is where it needs to be. Lauren's asking, how do you choose between the clay brush and the clay strips brush? So there's a pretty big difference. Let me just go ahead and add in a UV sphere and kind of talk about this. Okay, I'm going to pull this off to the side so you guys can see what the difference is here. Still getting used to all the menus, guys. I'm sorry. Okay, clay strips. You can again, the names help to differentiate kind of what they do. So strips implies working with strips of clay, and it's very much like that when you're adding these to your model. So if I turn back on the dynamic topology, um, let's kind of see what this looks like. So the clay strips are literally going to add strips of clay on top of, kind of what you're working on there. So you can see what that does. And if you carve in going the other way, it's going to take out strips of clay. So again, if we switch that, in this case, to add and go the other way, it's going to kind of do that. Let me turn this back on. Okay. So that's what the resolution turned up higher, so you guys can see what that does. So if I have a big section, this is where we've added a bunch of clay, and this is where we've dug in a bunch of clay. I'll just do several strokes on top of each other like that. You can see that there's pretty concave in there. What the clay brush will do is kind of add blobs of clay back in. So if I have it on minus, you can see that it's filling in these sections where we've added those strips, and over here it'll fill this in. Let me undo that a little bit. Let's turn up the strength. So it's basically just filling this back into the surface with clay. If we go the other way, it's going to take that away. So it's a more subtle way to remove. We're not scraping, because scraping would imply that we're taking planes and leveling off areas. And that's not what we're really trying to do here. With clay, it's a smooth transition. So we would, without lines, we'd basically be adding or taking away material. And so that's kind of how you can think of that. The difference being that with the scrape tool, if we get way far out here, we can really quickly do like hard surface sculpting. So we level off a huge area, we zoom in, and then we like define an edge. And scrape is great for like beveling with a sculpt. So you can see I'm beveling this edge. And this is great for doing like robots and stuff like that. If you want to sculpt hard surface stuff with brushes, you can use scrape. So you can see how that looks. I'm not sure if it's a bug that in 2.8 the dynamic topology keeps turning on and off. It's a good question. I wouldn't take anything that we're looking at tonight as final, because this isn't even in beta yet. We're still technically in alpha 2. Beta isn't going to be released for the next couple of weeks. So anything that you see, take with a grain of salt, because there's still going to be bugs and stuff like that. But it's important to kind of get used to all this, because this is kind of what it's going to look like. So that's why I wanted to show you guys in 2.8, and eventually we're going to only be using 2.8. So the quicker we can get in here and kind of get used to all of this stuff now, the better off we're going to be. All right, so let's get back to her eyes. Oh, Alberto, what's up, man? Okay, so Alberto's in the chat. I promised him if he came in tonight and said hello, I would show you guys his channel. So give me 1 second. Alberto's my buddy. He's another Blender Foundation certified trainer. So let me pull up his channel real quick, because he's an amazing buddy of mine. So Alberto is a much better sculptor than me, and I would encourage you guys to go check out his YouTube channel. So he's in the chat if you want to say hello. But this is his YouTube channel. You can see a lot of the stuff he's working on here. I would highly recommend you guys go ahead and subscribe. But you can see he sculpts creatures and people and all that kind of stuff. So we're probably going to buddy up and do some stuff later on next year. But I just wanted to introduce you guys to Alberto, because he's an amazing buddy. So yeah, a lot of cool videos. He's been doing this for quite a while. He's a game artist and has been doing Blender for a very long time. And yeah, his specialty is characters, modeling, hard surface as well. You can see that here. He's got a new course coming out soon. So, yeah, please support him. Give him a subscribe, and he's a really cool dude. So, encourage you guys to go there. No problem, buddy. I I hope we can chat again soon. Okay, so let's get back to the face here. Eyes. Now, we don't have enough skin like up here. I noticed when we started creasing, we're getting a little tight, and we also haven't covered up, looking at the top and the bottom of the iris, we're not really lined up because you can see how far apart the differences are there. So I'm going to try to correct that right now. So let's get in here and just kind of move stuff around. Now we can do that with clay strips. I'm going to undo, go back to minus. Do that with clay strips pretty quickly. Fill that in. Just want to get it above the skin of the eye so that we can see where that lines up with the top there. And we want to overlap in the right places, right? So somewhere about there. And then the bottom, we want to do the same thing. So I want to pull this around, and we want to get this lined up sort of right here towards the bottom. And then from there, if we want to get a little bit more sophisticated, we grab the grab tool and like manually sort of just line this stuff up until it's where it needs to be. So if you're getting some weird lines, grab tool will help quite a bit to kind of get that into a better position. Still got the dynamic topology turned on, at least we should. There we go. Got to remember to turn that back on. And now when we go back in with clay and quickly brush over, we might get a little bit lower percentage here to add in some more geometry. And then when we smooth this out by holding shift, that's going to work better for us. Okay. So let's grab our scrape tool again. Now we got a pretty big differentiation here on the way the eye is shaped, and this is really important to get right. So the sphere of the eye and everything, because we used a model, is going to be locked in. But around that, all of these shapes that define this edge resolution is going to really nail whether or not this looks correct. So this water line on the bottom and really the shape of the lid and how flat it is important. So we want to try to get that in right now. So if we look at a different angle, we can see just how we're kind of missing that right now, that edge definition. And so to do that, first, again, you want to have enough clay to work with. So I'm going to work with some clay strips here, add that around so we can make sure we have enough to work with. And we're going to want that on the bottom and the top. So following around, we're going to want to add that kind of around here. And if you have enough, you don't really need to add in with a clay strip, but just to give you guys some visuals of how this is going to work, I'm going to add those in. And now what we can do is using something like scrape, we can go back in and again, flatten this area back down like that. Now, what's really important as well is the geometry. So this is coming out rounded here and it's setting in and flat. So we don't really want this as an angle that's a draft like that, sort of at a 30-degree angle. We want this really, really flat under here. So if we don't have the resolution to make that work, then we need to go ahead and add that geometry. And I'm actually probably using a little bit too much resolution right now, so let's pull that detail back up. I'm going to add in some more clay to work with, and we're going to take it back out with the scrape. So let's go back to scrape, but now we've got a little bit more to scrape off. And so I'm going to go under, and I'm going to scrape off from underneath so that we've got a more vertical collapse in there. So you can see what that's doing as I rotate back off, and I show you guys from the front view. So you can see the difference now is that we get a really big sharp inset going back in, and that is much more like what we're seeing here in the reference. So that's important. So you can see that angle, that really sharp bend there, and that's really what we want, is we want to get that definition locked in because that's what we're seeing. So let's go back to crease, pay attention to where that ends on the corner there. And it's really just kind of about smoothly getting into this workflow where we're switching tools and We're not worried. Now again, we're getting some of that weird artifacting going on. We got some random stray polys. If that starts happening, jump into the remesh and just really quickly optimize, and that'll get rid of that. Or you can resymmetrize or whatever you need to do. But that is kind of how you fix that. Let's work on the upper lid before we move down to the lower. Make sure we've got this kind of working. And you can see if we start to pull out, sorry about that, you can see how much more refined that starts to look as you really start to get that three-dimensional aspect of those lids in there. It starts to really work for you. So I want this all to be one piece here. So let's hold shift and smooth, get rid of that line that we don't need until we get to this upper corner here. Okay, let's go back in with crease. Once again. Now it's really important, again, don't draw what you think you see, right? Look, trace the lines interface with your eyes, and then copy those exact motions with your pen while you're sculpting. If you look and then you get over here and you just go, okay, well, I think I did this, it's never going to be right. What you got to do, and this is important whether you're drawing, sculpting, whatever you're doing, you have to train your eyes to really be able to look and see what you're trying to replicate. Because a lot of times we use shortcuts with our brain. We look and we go, okay, well, that's an eye, and I know what an eye looks like. I just need to get in here and I just need to draw, this, and there's a hole in the, and that's not going to work because every single line and every single face or every single object is so different. And it's all about geometry. And so to nail this, again, correctly, and this was why we talked about finding a neutral pose earlier on in the process, it's because every time you smile, every time you frown, every time you move your face in a different position, those expressions change the geometry on your face. And it doesn't really sound like it would, but your angles and the drafts and everything around your eyes, they're moving across muscles and across the bone structure of your body. And so you can think about if you smile versus if you frown and the skin completely moves, the shapes and the lighting and everything else are going to move. And so that's a problem when you're trying to sculpt and get some likeness going on because it can introduce some issues for you. Okay, so let's get the bottom lid in here now. Do we have enough geometry to work on? I think we do. We want to scrape off, and we got too much of a bulge going on down here. So let's pull back a little bit. Let's flatten this back out. We'll smooth underneath and get rid of that line, and we'll add that back in. But for now, I want to get rid of it. And I'm scraping, and then I'm holding shift and smoothing to get rid of any weird hard edges that are in there. So notice that it's going to go in a little bit. So if we need to grab a clay strips, we can go in a little bit more underneath. And what I might do is lower the size a little bit here. So I don't really want to crease yet. I want to take away clay. Up the size, hold shift, smooth this back out. And you can see, because we have such a detailed size, how much problems that introduced for me. Now when I try to smooth that back out, I'm getting issues. So let's go back up to something like 12. And now when we carve in and I try to smooth, it's going to be easier to get rid of those lines because we have less polygons to worry about. Okay, so now let's switch back to scrape. Shift to smooth, scrape. Okay, optimize, there we go. Okay, so I want to keep the ridge, but I don't need a huge bag under this eye right now. So I'm getting rid of that with scrape. So we're just keeping what we need. And you'll notice as I go around this lower edge, I'm getting a more refined line and crease automatically on that upper line there. Okay, there we go. Lauren's asking, could you have removed clay under the eye with the scrape tool? Yeah, we definitely could have, but it just depends on what you're going for. Scrape is really going to kind of polish off that extra geometry. And if you want to remove big chunks of clay, then I would say grab a clay strips or something like that where you can just dig into the skin, because clay strips using the subtractive method is just going to allow you to take out huge chunks as needed. And I really needed to remove more clay under there before we got in and started messing with stuff. So now that we are there, let's double check our proportions, everything. Let's grab the grab tool, let's make it bigger. And I want to reshape this because we're losing some of the definition in terms of the way this eye is shaped. So we got a little teardrop sort of thing going on here. And if it's not looking like that now, we got a problem. So let's fix that. I want that eye to look like it should. So you can see just by really quickly grabbing this grab tool, how easy it is to get in here and fix big areas. And again, don't think you know what a teardrop shape looks like, right? Because you're just going to simplify what's going on. Get in here real close and go, all right, is that a straight line or is it a line that dips in right here? Like get real into that and go, all right, what am I really looking at here? And you're going to have to, it's a give and take, right? So I'm shaping the tear duct here a little bit more, and I'm going to have to lower the size of my tool because I want to be able to get a little bit of a crook in there. So we're going to lower the size of our grab, pull that in subtly, and then pull that back up so we have a little hump here. And then if you want to make sure we don't have a lot of wiggles and bumps that we have to correct later, up your brush size again. So that's where it needs to be. And now once you're done, you got to go back and clean up, right? So we'll grab whatever tool we need, scrape or whatever you want to do. Smooth, it's fine, all that stuff. And then we go back in and we go, all right, let's go ahead and simplify all of this stuff. So you can see I'm zooming in a little bit because I don't want to get rid of all this detail that I've worked on. So if I zoom out too far, I'm going to lose a lot of this stuff, and that's a problem. Okay, so now we can go ahead and grab, if we have like a really refined edge that's really tight in here, we can go ahead and pinch that up. So let's grab the pinch brush, zoom in a little bit. And you want to, again, right now, again, I don't know if this is a bug or not, but you want to go opposite. So tighten that up just like that. And let's crease underneath again because we shifted all that around. So we got a little bit of an inset there. And now that we've kind of removed all the stuff we need to remove, if we need to crease, it's going to be a little bit easier to do that. Now, what I'm going to do a little different here is that I'm not going to crease using this really tight curve. I'm going to start off with a smooth curve, and that's going to allow me to crease a big area in, and you'll see what I mean. So we do this. It's going to kind of do that. Now, that's really exaggerated, but that's kind of what I'm going to do first. And I'm going to do that right under the eye, right here, to kind of help us out with this. So I'm going to lightly brush in there to kind of give us an inset like that, but I'm going to zoom in and do it. And I'm just going to layer this up by going back and forth and kind of stroking over the same area. And if it gets a little too aggressive, I'm going to go back and smooth. But this is going to allow me to really smoothly get the shape here underneath the eye in a place where I like what I'm seeing. We do the same thing on the side of the nose here. It's very subtle. You can see what that does. You can see that curvature there. This is where we would want to do the same thing we're doing with the eye, we would do with the nose. You can see how subtle, like how soft I'm doing these strokes. I don't want to get in here and go nuts, because now is the time where we're starting to kind of define how this is working. So you can see the difference here. If I have a really soft curve for that smoothness there, was the far left button is the smooth curve option. It's going to give me a really smooth fall off. Now I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go back over here and pick this option, which is a really sort of pointed inset. So now you can see a little bit of the difference there. And if I really crank this in, you're going to see even more of how that really gives me a line inside of that and the difference of how that's working. So it's important to understand how to utilize these tools a little differently depending on what you're after, because even the same tool, depending on the curve you're set here, can really make a huge difference in terms of how you kind of pull all this off. So I'm trying to refine the shape here on the edge of the nose. So we see the transition from the cheek where it's pretty flat right here to the side of the nose, and we got a big flat section that's kind of a draft right here. So I'm going to grab the scrape tool, kind of flatten that back out, and then we need to look at our shape here with the nose and just determine, all right, are we kind of getting there? Are we ballpark in the right place? If not, I got to go back, and if it's too skinny, I got to either grab and pull back out, or I got to add in some clay strips to kind of correct what I did there. So let's hold shift. So America says he's got to go to sleep. Watch you next time. Thanks for streaming by. Hey, no problem, man. Thanks for dropping in. I appreciate your time. And catch it on the replay. How are we doing on time? We got half an hour left. All right, so I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. You can also use flatten. I've been using scrape a lot more lately, but flatten is just kind of a more subtle way of doing that. And again, in this case, it's probably reversed. So we're going to want to go positive instead of negative, and that's what flatten will do for you. So just a little bit more subtle compared to the scrape. But I like the scrape brush because, especially when you're doing models like this, you can see how angular we get with this, and it really helps you define early on what the shapes need to look like on the face to nail this down, and that's important. Because if you can get it looking good in a blocky format, then when you go back and smooth everything and it looks good, it's going to look that much better in terms of how you are working this stuff out. So let's get in here and refine some of the shapes of the nose. We need to have a little bit more of sort of a bulb happening here in the end. It's going to come down kind of like this. And then we got some inconsistencies going on here. So I'm going to pull this in, try to smooth all this out. Just very subtly going in and smoothing, not getting crazy. But you can see how that helped a little bit. It's still looking a little freakish without the hair and all that stuff, but you can see how that nose reshape right there just a little bit really kind of made it feel, all right, it's a little better. So we got too much of a ridge happening here. It's flatter than that. So let's fix that. So this needs to get blended back in and smoothed. And this edge over here really doesn't need to be there. So we need to get rid of this altogether in there. Gonna subtly kind of smooth all that back because it's getting a little intense down there. And it's kind of just this give and take process of getting in here and saying, all right, well, what are we really looking at? Now that we've got the nose in a better place, we are more confident about how that's looking. I want the underside of this to be a little higher up. It's going to dip down a little bit here. So let's reshape. There's a name for this, but I don't remember the name of it right now. So I'm gonna pull these off, and I'm looking for really how this is coming together. And it's a solid shape sort of at the top where it kind of connects. And off of that, you've got this little upside down horseshoe shape that comes off and connects with the top of the lips. And inside of that, you've got this sort of concave area like that. And once you start to understand how those edges are connected, it really starts to, make shaping things a little easier for you. So it needs to go higher up, connect in with the underside of the nose. We'll zoom in and connect that up a little higher up there. Smooth out those lines so they don't get too crazy. And at some point, you're going to get to where those little details like that are really all you're working on throughout the face. If it gets too harsh, you want to go back and soften that up. Probably got some big issues we want to work on with the side of the jaw and stuff like that. So I think for now, let's go back in and start working on the rest of her head shape, dialing that in. And let's just see if we can get that looking correct. So I'm going to go to the side here. Dig in with the clay strips brush, really taking out a lot of that we don't need. Front of her head, if we look straight on, we're in an orthographic. You gotta remember that's gonna change how this looks. So now if I zoom out in perspective, it looks a little different. And that's important. So let's pull that out. Now she's got a really skinny sort of frame, so we need to work on that. So let's grab our grab brush. Let's take our detail percentage up to about 15. Let's pull this in back here. So from the front, we're not even seeing her neck, the back of her head, all that kind of stuff from this angle. And some of that's to do with the lens, but some of that's also to do with, again, just the fact that she's got a skinnier frame. So that little change, bringing that in to where we're seeing more of her neck line up with the jawline, that helps a lot from the front there. Do the same thing with her head. We can pull back a little bit. Zoom in a little bit here, and I just want to add a little bit more geometry so that we can smooth this all out without it looking too crazy. Okay, now the rest of this back here, I'm going to have to guesstimate because I don't know what she looks like from back of this angle. And that's okay because, again, her hair is going to cover this up at some point. There's a long way to go to get her looking perfect and dial the rest of this in. But once you understand how to get these basics in here, big proportions are really kind of the most important thing. If you can figure that out, most of the work's done, and details are not really that hard. It's just about paying attention to the features, zooming in, and copying what you see. It's about being able to be a good observer, because the technique behind it is not hard. It's the same simple tools you would use for the rest of this stuff. It's just that you have to respect the process and realize that early on, even though you want to get in and start working on the eyes and all that kind of stuff, we spent an hour and a half getting to the point where we could start focusing on a lot of those details close up, because the proportions were more important, right? And we're still not anywhere near making this look like her, but you can see from the features, if you just zoom in on one part of her face, it's getting there. And the trick to getting the rest of this locked in is going to be about pulling all of those individual pieces together. And a lot of that's going to be done for us as we just kind of start refining and getting things worked up to a better place. So I'm going to work on that a little bit more tonight before we wrap up, so we can kind of get it a little closer. But you'll see over the next few streams kind of what I'm talking about. It's not really rocket science. We're just trying to do our jobs here, observe, pay attention, all that stuff. It's getting a little lumpy. We want to smooth all that out. The back of her head. Now, a head is not really perfectly round, so you want to go look up the proportions of the head, pay attention to that kind of stuff. You're going to have quite a big dip in the back that I just kind of added in there. That is important. And of course, the neck is going to come off of that. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the neck comes out of the center of the head. You've got the rest of the head back here with the skull and all that stuff behind it, and you need to have in those basic positions to make this feel correct. So I'm going to smooth back out, you know, any big lines that I'm adding in, but you can see the shadowing is really indicating, okay, we got a skull going on. So I got the connection with the jaw right here, which is a little intense, so I want to fix that with clay strips. So let's dig in here so that jaw line is more pronounced. Now again, from the front, you're not really going to notice that, but from the side, that's pretty important. There you can see that. And now we're going to go ahead and clean up the bust so that it kind of feels, you know, like a traditional bust would feel. So I'm going to add some clay in so that we have some stuff to work with. And we're going to work on getting this kind of shaped up correctly. Now, here's where the scrape tool will really come in and help you out and kind of make this feel a little bit more like a bust. So again, what I like to do really is simplify stuff that we don't really have to make detailed. So because a lot of this is really just smoothed and we're not really going to be obsessing about it because we're probably going to end up covering it with some sort of hair, we don't really need to focus on making it perfect. So we can simplify a lot of those shapes, get a little bit more just basic geometric detail blocked in here. And that's really where the scrape tool is going to make this feel like, okay, it feels a little bit more artistic. You know, feels more correct a little bit here. So let's focus on the neck before we go crazy with the scrape tool. One last pass with the clay strips. I'm going to lower the size, pull this in, and we're going to want this little V she has down here. We got some additive sort of neck, skin, muscles, tissue coming off in here. So that's coming out. It caves in a little bit for this crease, and then there's a big dip in here where her, I think that's called the mastoid notch, is in there. And then we got some more cave in on the side, some additive back and forth, and then we got collarbones out here. So this is where we would really want to go in and throw in some more clay. So you can use the grab tool. That's a really quick way to pull out some more stuff to work with. And it's up to you to kind of just decide how far you want to go with this. But that should be enough to kind of get us something to work with. And then we can kind of go back in and, you know, tweak this stuff up. General to specific, that's what we're doing. Now we can kind of throw those collarbones in there. If we need to add in some more big areas, we can use the blob tool. We want to obviously go this way. Now we'll just add in some shoulders areas over here for us to play with. Okay, so we're going to dig in. Okay, so pull those back down. And then we'll just kind of reset where all this is happening. These are collarbones. Build up some of the muscles in here. We're really going to want to add in some muscle connecting to the neck, as you can see this area here. Give that a light smooth over this whole area. There we go. So slowly started to build these forms up, and then when you want more and more sort of definition and contrast, you just go back slowly and start to add that in. And so I'm not going crazy right off the bat. I'm just kind of working on this a little bit at a time. And if we lose that detail, it's easy enough to add back in. But you can't just go in and be, bam, you like carve this in with one stroke and be like, done. Like it, very rarely will it work out where that is sufficient. So layer this up, add in some more muscle around the bottom of the neck. See that coming off there. See, it's subtle, but it's enough to make a difference. It's all about the subtle. We got some more neck muscles. The front, this is coming down. Build this up back into here. That comes in. We got these sort of coming down and around. Okay, now we're done with that. Let's smooth, call it good. Okay, so we got detailed, but you can notice, even though they're there in the sculpt, it feels a little intense, right? It feels like we got a little too crazy with this. So I would recommend exercising caution with how much of this musculature stuff you're going to throw in, especially in a woman, because it's not always that flattering, right? So just pay attention to that kind of stuff. Pull the face in a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna fix whatever we got going on here. Probably a difference in the topology settings. So we'll smooth that out. We'll do the same thing up here. Just kind of add in some geometry, go back and smooth it. I want to flatten this out so it's not going crazy. And what you're going to have on the side of the head, around the temple area, back to the back of the skull, is not a round shape. So if we look back here, we're getting there, but it's sort of a flat area where the skull is capped in here. So I want to grab this and just kind of shape everything a little bit better. So I'm going to grab this area and just pull that side in a little bit so that it's a little bit flatter. Now again, one of the common mistakes people make is they make the head too small up towards the top. There's a lot of room up here with the hair that you don't really see. So you don't want to do that. But okay, looking at this curvature, trying to get her jawline finalized there. Okay, and I'm just looking at features, trying to line them up. So if the edge of her mouth goes out to the side, we can see where that curvature starts and stops from the front and just determine how close we're getting with this profile. And then it's just about, trying to line all that up. So okay, go back and smooth. This line that I threw in here for the chin, I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of that just so we can kind of preview without it. Okay, so I'm gonna simplify real fast, and then I might go ahead and just really quickly try to block in some hair so it looks a little bit more cohesive. And that'll be a good place to wrap tonight. I'm using Scrape right now to kind of make the bust look like a bust. So okay, so you can see you kind of cut that off, flatten it out a little bit more. It's looking a little bit more cleaned up. That's what we want. Okay, so let's work on getting this into a better place. So one of the things I haven't done is saved, which is, you guys know me, that's a terrible habit of mine. So let's go ahead and save. And then I'm going to add in a new mesh to get started with this. Let's just go ahead and add in a cube. I'll go ahead and give this a couple of subdivisions. We'll apply that, and then we'll try to place this. Okay, so I'm in orthographic mode on the side, and I just want to get this roughly in the right place. And there we go. Okay, so we've got kind of like a little shower cap thing going on now, and that's a good starting point. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there and jump back into sculpt mode. We want to use the same basic principles we've been using. So turn on dynamic topology, and then I'm just going to divide this up with clay strips as we go. We'll keep it at a pretty high value early on. And before I get too crazy, I want to, again, reshape this. So let's look at the reference, try to dial this in quickly. Got the bottom of her hair. It's probably pulled back in a ponytail or something in this shot. So I'm just kind of trying to get this worked out. Now, I'm going to pay attention to where this starts and stops because we didn't cut the mesh or anything like that, so the hairline is going to be important to kind of get locked in. But once we've got a basic starting point, I can do the rest with just regular sculpting tools. So that's good enough to get going. Now we can jump back into clay strips and start to play with stuff. so the first thing I'm going to focus on is kind of the hairline, and I'm just using the plus and minus with control to kind of dictate where that is on the head. So hers is pretty flat, and it's high up. So this is really just hiding and unhiding the edge of where that starts on the face, and kind of paying attention to all that. The ear is going to be somewhere in here, right about there. So we want to dig that in around that. Smooth back to the head. And that's enough to kind of imply what we're trying to go for here. So if you want, you can grab the blob, throw a little ponytail back there, whatever you want to do. We can even grab the snake hook, pull something down. Kind of like that. And we're just implying hair. We're not going to add strokes for all the hair and all that stuff. Like, that's really not what you want to do in a sculpt anyways. Odds are you may not even use the hair you end up sculpting. It's just there to make the model not look like a freak. So plan your time accordingly. So you can see this very much starts to feel kind of like a hairline back here. And once you're ready to get a little bit more detailed, you can just scrape what you need to. You can always add texture with different types of strokes or textures on your brushes. But again, you just want to ask, is it worth the time for what you're doing? If all you're really trying to do is get across that there's hair back here, then it's not super necessary to go crazy. So I'm using inflate to kind of fatten this area up for the hair back here. Grab this and pull it in a little bit, kind of imply there's a ponytail or something going on, pinching that up back there. And then once again, just go back with clay strips. If you need more detail, add it, smooth it, and you're good to go. Okay. So let's take a look at, I wonder if we can grab the type of stroke we're using here, and let's use, yeah, there was a rake option, so I don't know if that's under the draw tool, maybe. I'll have to look that up. Basically, there's a way to kind of rake in some texture, and that may be a good option for hair. But anyways, I'm not gonna mess with that tonight. Clay strips. Okay. So with clay strips, you can kind of get there anyways. You really just want to go with the flow of the hair and imply some of that that detail. So I'm just holding control and just quickly going in and layering up some strokes back to back to back. And that's enough to really kind of start to imply like, okay, we got some hair, you know, and that's really all you're going for here. So you get into you know, there's a lot of asymmetry going on here, but obviously when you get to that stage, you'd want to follow the actual folds and try to mimic some of what's going on there to copy that hairstyle. Okay. So guys, I think that's going to be pretty close to it tonight for what we're going to be able to do. I know we didn't get it looking great tonight, but we've laid that foundation. So now when we go back in next week and we start talking about more details, we'll talk about how to get it from a point that's kind of looking like this and what we may want to fix, what we're going to work on next, and some stuff like that. So I'm just going to keep this going. I don't know how many sessions it'll take to get this looking great, but we'll just keep at it until we get it to a place where it's looking good. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream tonight. I enjoyed hanging out with you guys. Obviously, check out theorangeguild.com. If you're not a subscriber to the Orange Guild YouTube channel, then definitely subscribe. Hit the like and the notification tonight to get more info about when we go live next. I'm currently working on an amazing boot camp for you guys that's going to be coming up on Cyber Monday. And so it will be a whole new kind of Blender training that's outside of the subscription and all that kind of stuff. Really special thing that I'm offering that will really take you guys entirely behind the scenes for 3D illustration and show you how to create some epic stuff. So I would love to hang out with a lot more, spend a lot more time with you guys tonight, but unfortunately I gotta go hang out with my family. So Lauren's asking how the Sand Dragon's coming along. It's going good. I'm taking a little bit of break on that. I'm probably gonna get back to it next year because of the boot camp I've got coming up. Lorenzo says very cool. I appreciate you guys dropping in tonight. Like I said, I always love hanging out with you guys every Friday night, and it's fun to talk to you guys. So a lot of times it's just me here alone in the studio working on stuff, and it's always good to interact with my sort of Orange Guild family, as I like to think of you guys. So definitely subscribe if you haven't, if you're new. Check this out, and there's more stuff coming your way. So I will see you guys next week, same time, unless I send out an email letting you know we're changing times. But subscribe to the orangeguild.com newsletter or the mailing list so that you can get info on when the live streams happen, new products coming out, stuff like that. And I'll be in touch with you guys soon. So I'll see you, and have a good weekend, guys. Later. Yes, Lorian, next Friday is when we're doing this, 7 p.m. I'll see you guys. Bye.